sir. Well, I'm pretty sure I have my mic on, so you don't got to flash the sign at me upstairs. Can everybody hear me out there? If you don't know, they have a sign up there for people like me who sometimes forget to turn their microphone on. So, I might check. Hey, time out. Let's move this up a little bit. How about, is that better? Maybe. Okay, if you can hear me in the back, I need a 2 thumbs up. 2 thumbs up. Okay, cool. If you put your foot up in the... No, I'm just kidding. You keep your feet on the ground. All right. Nah. Man, that first song really touched me this morning because, you know, in that part of that verse where it says, weak made strong, I'm not going to lie, I'm feeling pretty weak this morning. Like they were saying, I probably should have told my boss I didn't want to work last night, but also didn't want to get in trouble at work. So I worked from 1:30 to about 6:40 this morning, and went home and I got an hour of sleep and came back up here, and now we're ready to roll. So my body's kind of hating me at it for the moment, but I'm very excited for where we're about to go today, just to kind of give y'all a little direction for where we're going to be heading this morning. I've kind of broken this sermon up into 2 different parts. Because in the first part, I really want to handle what the text is saying and what God is trying to say to each and every one of us in this room through the text. And then through the last part of the sermon, I really want to connect it to connect these verses to what my vision is here and what God's placed in my heart for our youth program here at Temple Baptist Church. So just so you know, it's going to be kind of broken up into 2 parts. They're going to flow together pretty well, I think, but I'm very excited about it. It's like Brother Sam was saying a couple weeks ago, you know, from the time I'd come on here and accepted the position, I've been praying about a verse that God would point out to me that, you know, He could just stick out and be like, this is what our key verse is going to be. This is what the youth ministry at Temple Baptist Church is going to be about. And after scrolling through the scriptures, God just really landed on this one. And when I laid my eyes on it and I read it, I was like, this one has to be the one, because this... so good right here, and I know it's going to stand for everything that we want to do here at Temple. So I'm going to reread it again, but before we reread it, as Brother Sam read earlier, I'd like to pray one more time before entering in. So, dear God, we're just so thankful that we get to come here so freely and worship You, God. Lord, I pray that God, You'll just remove any distractions from the room right now. God, help us to see Your Word clearly, God, hear Your Word clearly, God, and let's see how You wanted to speak to us through it. So, God, that we can apply these words to our lives, God, and that we can become better followers of You. And that, God, that the people around us can see that there's something different about us, God, and that we can point everything right back to You and say, it's all because of Jesus. So, God, I just thank You so much for this word. Lord, I pray that You'll bless the time that we're going to be reading it. Lord, I pray this in Your Son, Jesus' name. Amen. All right, starting in Luke chapter 6, verse 46 again, it says, "Why do you call me Lord, Lord, and do not do what I say? Everyone who comes to me and hears my words and acts on them, I will show you whom he is like. He is like a man building a house who dug deep and laid the foundation on the rock. And when the flood occurred, the torrent burst against the house and could not shake it, because it had been well built. But the one who has heard and has not acted accordingly is like a man who has built a house on the ground without any foundation. And the torrent burst against it, and immediately it collapsed, and the ruin of that house was great." So if you see here, obviously, you give a little backstory. We're right in the middle. So we're on the Sermon on the Mount here at this point. Jesus has just given the Beatitudes. He's just given this speech about being good trees and how you can tell a tree by the fruit that it bears. And then Jesus leans right into this. He's like, why are you coming here? Why do you keep calling me Lord, Lord, but you're not doing what I say? If you've ever had children, can you raise your hand? Your kids always do what you say. Does it irritate you a little bit? Just a little FYI, my mom will get a laugh out of this one. My nickname growing up was Wild Man. I was a little crazy. I like to break things and put them back together. That was my thing, amongst many other things that I did. We had a fun time in my household, but I know my mom probably got irritated with me a lot not listening to the words that she told me to do. And I imagine Jesus was not irritated here at this point, but he was asking a serious question here, and the serious question that these people really need to consider is like, hey, you've all followed me here. This is a great multitude around him. He's like, all y'all are sitting here and you're calling me Lord, Lord. You're calling out to me saying I'm your master, but you're not doing what I tell you to do. So why is that? And then Jesus gives 3 things that these people have come to do, right? And you can go over to the next slide real quick if you want. He says, you read here, and it says, everyone who comes to me, that's the first thing, comes, and then they hear my word and act on them. So we have come, hear, and act. And that's going to be kind of our theme that we're going to be looking around today. So we see, obviously, everybody here in the crowd had come to Jesus for something. Many of the people in the crowd had probably come for reasons that weren't all that great. They were probably looking for a miracle, looking for a healing, looking for whatever they could get out of Jesus, looking for what Jesus could do for them. Right? So maybe the intentions weren't the best, but nonetheless, they still came. Some of them probably came out of pure hearts, knowing that, hey, this is potentially the Messiah here. Come to hear the words, come to test them against the Word. So you have people coming for all different reasons, but nonetheless, the people came. And when they came, what did they do? They heard Jesus speaking, right? So everybody here in this story has done these first 2 things. They have come to Jesus. They have heard the words that He has spoken. But here is where the delineation occurs. Here's where the fork in the road splits. Because Jesus gives an example of 2 different kinds of people here in this parable. You have the one who hears and acts on His words, and then you have the one who hears and does not act accordingly to His words. And obviously He says, the one who hears my words and acts on them, he is like the man who built his house on a firm foundation, who dug down deep and laid the foundation on the rock. And obviously, foundations are pretty important, right? Foundations have to be important because, of course, the whole rest of the building is situated on top of that. I've been watching a lot of foundation work recently, and it's been really frustrating me, just so you know. Because I live on Getwell Road, right? Yonder? I think it's that way? Yeah, that way. Okay, Getwell's that. I'm terrible with directions, but yeah. So Getwell's that. I live over there, right? And every day I go to work at the airport. And I drive up Getwell, and I go past Church Road, and about the time I get to Goodman, I see a place where they're building something right there. And they've been working on the groundwork and the foundation of that building for at least 3 months now, I know. They've been spending their precious time on it. And that building is the most glorious thing. I don't know. It's pretty great. Besides like building a new church, this is like top tier right here. They're building a Whataburger right there, okay? If you don't know what Whataburger is, let me explain it to you, okay? It is the pinnacle of fast food restaurants. This, I'm pretty sure for the appetizer meal in heaven, they're going to have some honey butter chicken biscuits up there. Like, I'm 90% positive about that one. I hadn't found it in Scripture yet, but I'm looking for it. So I drive past it every day. And they're still working on the foundation. They're laying the foundation. They're working on the pipe. They're laying the concrete. They're doing the groundwork, whatever they have to do. And I'm like, man, what is taking them so long? I'm ready to be able to go up there at 2 o'clock in the morning when I get off a shift and get me a honey butter chicken biscuit. But alas, I ain't gonna lie. I drove past it today, and they're putting some walls up, so amen to that. But it's going to be a good time, people. We might have to take a church field trip to Whataburger, okay? But the reason they're taking so long on it is because foundations are so important. Because if you don't build your foundation right, you end up with something like this over here. A beautiful building with a bad foundation. Everybody know what that is? Leaning Tower of Pisa right there? Yes. Beautiful building. Foundation stinks. Sinking into the ground. It is going nowhere because you can build up this elegant building, but if the foundation is not right, it's not going to amount to anything. Right? And I'm also, a little bit, another story, just so you know, my family. big sports people growing up. Big sports people. I'm talking about like growing up in my household, the only thing that was ever on TV typically was Sports Center, or a football game, or a baseball game, or a basketball game, or occasionally, if they let me have the remote, I'd put a soccer game on sometimes, but it'd be on another channel. But that was like what was going on in the living room, right? I love sports. Big sports guy. But sometimes watching sports really bores me. So I like to watch other things. So I'd go watch things like the Discovery Channel, stuff like that. And I remember watching this How It Works show one time. And they were talking about how they build skyscrapers, right? And I was like, man, didn't know at the time. It's going to play well into the sermon today, though. Skyscrapers, big, huge buildings. We don't really have, we got some skyscrapers here in Memphis, but not like big skyscrapers, not like, wow, that's really tall. Like, you go to Memphis and you're like, oh, that's a tall building. But like, you go to Chicago and you see Willis Tower, you're like, that's a tall building. Yeah, like you got that skyscraper neck looking up like this. But these skyscrapers, they're really marvels, honestly, of like engineering and physics and everything that you have to do to go into this. They are marvels because it takes a lot to get that thing to stand up right. So you have all this stuff above the ground, right? So you have all this building and everything. But you got to imagine, the foundation on them things has to be rock solid. So you know what they do. Next picture, Brother David. Yeah, okay. So if you see up top up there, that's the rest of it. Do you see those nice little pillars that go down there? You have all these gigantic pillars that are under the building, right? And like they got a concrete slab down that they go into and they connect to the building with, but they dig down, just like this verse is talking down here, about here. They dig all the way down to the bedrock. Because you can't have a building that massive just sitting on top of loose soil. There would never, ever work. It'd be a disaster. So you take these things and you dig down, and that's how they get these things to stand. I remember watching that when I was little, and I was like, wow, that's cool. How do they do that? And like it had like the construction site and everything. It's a really big undergoing. Crazy stuff. Let's go to the next picture real quick, Brother David. Here you got a picture of some of the tallest buildings in the world. And now that I'm looking at this, y'all probably can't see that very well. But I got some statistics here for y'all. I'm a big statistics guy. I like the numbers. Numbers don't lie, you know. So going through here, some of the ones that we know. Willis Tower, the one we were talking about, the big tall building in Chicago. Been there, been to the top of it. Very scary. If you don't like heights, don't do that. But it has 114 reinforced concrete pillars that set into the bedrock with a 5-foot thick concrete mat that it sits on. It's a big building. Okay, and then I'm just going to go, so we got the One World Trade Center, obviously the one in New York. It has rock anchors that extend 80 feet into the bedrock. Underground supports, and it's built around already a pre-existing commuter trains that are down there. But 80 feet into the bedrock. Crazy to me how they could dig 80 feet into the bedrock. And then lastly here, the one on the very end you see over there, that's the Burj Khalifa. That's the tallest building in the world, right? It has 192 foundation pillars in it, and each one has a 5-foot diameter with a 12-foot concrete mat. You can tell these people, they took their foundations very seriously, because they didn't want their masterpieces to end up like the Leaning Tower of Pisa and fall over or something devastating happen. Because the foundations are so important. And we see this, and we see here that Jesus is talking about the exact same thing. He's talking about, hey, this man who's doing what he's supposed to, this man who is coming to me, who is hearing my words, and he is acting upon them, is like the man who dug down and laid a foundation on the rock, just like they had to do for all these skyscrapers. Because the thing is, the stuff that sits above the bedrock is not anything that we are able to build our lives upon. When we look at it at first glance, we can look at the ground and we can be like, that's good ground. I can build my life on that right there. And there's so many different things that we look at. Things that we try to build our life off of. We take relationships, whether it be if you're young like me and you're dating, or if you're older and you're married, we build our lives around our relationships, marriages, families. things that aren't necessarily bad things. You have some other people, and they try to build their life around their job. And everything that they do in their life revolves around their job, revolves around that. You have other people, they try to revolve their life around things that make them happy. Whatever I can do to make me happy, that's what my life is going to be built on. But all of these things are like the song says, every single bit of it is sinking sand. I often, or not often, but when I was going through this, I couldn't help but think about the book Pilgrim's Progress. You see at the very beginning of it, Christian realizes he has a burden on his back. And he exclaims, he says, if I cannot get this burden off my back, surely it will drag me down to hell. And when our life is built on sinking sand, that burden will pull us all the way down. That's why we have to have a foundation to rest on. So the question is, what is that foundation? What can we build our lives on that can keep us from sinking down into hell? What can we build our life on that will constantly support us? I'm sure most of us in here know the answer. But I love the way Isaiah puts it. In Isaiah, I'm going to flip back here. In Isaiah 26, reminds you, this was written 500 years roundabouts before Jesus was even born. Now, Isaiah is a marvelous book. If you've never read the book of Isaiah, highly recommend it. They call it the fifth gospel for a reason. So much messianic prophecy in here. And here in the middle of this warning that he's given to the nation of Judah because of the actions that they've done, we see this glimpse of hope that Isaiah gives. So in Isaiah, I said 26, sorry. We're in Isaiah 28, verse 16. Yes, so let me repeat that now. Isaiah 28, verse 16. Sorry, I said it wrong. He says, therefore, thus says the Lord God, behold, I am laying in Zion a stone, a tested stone, a costly cornerstone for the foundation, firmly placed, that he who believes in it will not be disturbed. See, what you got to understand is, the time Isaiah was writing this, there was war raging around Judah. Kingdoms coming in, kingdoms going out. They had serious threats, people who wanted to wipe them off the face of the earth. So what did they do? Of course, they called out to God, right? No. What they were doing at this time, they were making alliances with all these pagan nations around them. The main one being Egypt. And they were putting their faith and their trust in these foreign pagan nations and their foreign pagan gods. And God said, no. You put your trust in me, and your trust in me alone. You go on to read, he talks about how all these alliances, they're going to be wiped out. But then you see, again, this glimpse of hope saying, I'm going to give you something that you can put all of your trust in. Something that you can look forward to, something that you can know, I'm making this promise now. That I'm putting that costly cornerstone in place. And how much it must have cost God to send His Son Jesus to die and become that cornerstone for us. It's hard to wrap your mind around the depths of God's love for us. But we see as Christ as that foundation, as that cornerstone, as that rock that we build our life on, with that burden on our back that wants to sink us down to hell. When we stand on Christ, He takes the burden for us, because that's what foundations do. When you stand in the top of a skyscraper, you can feel the wind pushing you back and forth. But it's because that it's because of the energy being transferred down into the foundation that building doesn't crack in half and fall over. Christ does the same for us. Our sin, the things that pull us down, it was transferred on to Christ, and He took the penalty for us. What a God that He would give us this foundation so freely. Then we see, going back to Luke, he built his life on this foundation. He built his house. It's built up. And when the flood occurred, notice, it didn't say if the flood occurred. It said when the flood occurred. A lot of people like to preach nowadays that, if you become a Christian, your life's going to be all good after that. No. We all know that's a bunch of baloney. Storms happen. Storms are going to happen. Just like they did here. It said, and when the flood occurred, the torrent burst against it. But it could not shake it because it had been well built. Anything less than building your life on the foundation that is Jesus is not built up to standard. And it will not stand the test of time. It will not be able to weather the storms that come in life. I was debating whether I was going to share this or not. I decided I am. Sorry, family. You'll see why in a second. I'm going to tell you about one of the worst storms I've ever had in my life. And that was when my dad passed away. Many of y'all know that already, but don't know too many details about it. But going into it, to give you a little timeline of what had happened. I had just got back from Tampa, Florida, where I'd led a youth retreat down there. I flew down there, led a youth retreat for the weekend, I came back. Mom and Dad picked me up at the airport. They were like, how'd it go? I was like, it went good. Also, I'm not going to med school anymore. God's definitely called me to the ministry. I got to do that. He's not going to let me do anything else. He's taking me kicking and screaming. So, surrendered to the ministry that night, right? Good time. Very high moment in my spiritual walk right there. I was going to go back down to Jackson, Mississippi that night, but I decided to stay home because I was very tired, and I decided, hey, I got some days I can skip. I can afford to skip class tomorrow, so I'm just going to drive down tomorrow. So I slept in, woke up, and at that time, I was getting ready to go. I packed up all my stuff, put it in my car, and I wanted to tell my dad bye. I walked in, and I was like, bye, Dad, love you, No response. Very atypical. My family says I love you a lot, like a lot. Like it's ridiculous how much we say I love you, honestly. But no response. So I was like, oh man, that's weird. So I went back there. My dad was collapsed in the bathroom floor. Had to get him up, bring him back. Got my grandmother to come over. They took him to the hospital. I was able to go back to school. Everything checked out for a little bit then. Still didn't know what was wrong with him. About 2 weeks later was when he passed away. In and out in the hospital during that time. The last 4 days were definitely the worst of it. Praying to God, fasting, trying to figure out what was wrong. Doctors don't know what's wrong. Just see your dad there in pain, wondering, why, God? Why does it have to be like this? It's one of the things I tell people a lot is like, I dealt with a lot of anger after this, and I said, I definitely could have dealt with it more if my dad wouldn't have been in so much pain when he passed away. He died of this disease called meningitis. It was a very different form than the regular bacterial form, but that's why the doctors didn't catch it. But what you don't know about it is you die from meningitis because your brain gets smushed from the inside out. And that's what my dad passed away of. And me being a med student, I knew exactly what was going on. And knowing what my dad was going through, I was like, why, God, why, God, why? So to go from a moment, and I remember one of the first questions I asked God was, God, I just gave up everything for you, God. All my hopes, dreams, ambitions, I laid it all on the line. I gave it all up for you, and you're going to take my dad away from me? Why would you do that to me, God? But even though I still don't have the answer to that question, and I never will, because my life was built on that foundation, because my family's life was built on that foundation, we weathered that storm. And we're still here today, and I'm still in ministry today. Because just like we're saying, when your life is built on that foundation, Jesus takes all that. He gives you peace and comfort when you shouldn't have peace and comfort. Guidance when you need guidance. Discernment when you need discernment. So that when you're going through those storms, although you can feel the shaking, just like when you're in the skyscraper, you can feel the wind moving you around, but you are confident that you are not going anywhere because you are anchored to that foundation. And I like what the Greek says here. The Greek has a word that's not translated into our English translations, and adds so much to this passage. Because where it says, when the torrent burst against the house, it could not shake it. What the Greek says is, when the torrent burst against the house, it did not have the power to shake it. Because no matter what this life throws at us, no matter what storms come our way, no matter what temptations come, doubts enter into our mind, or the devil or our enemy tries to throw at us, it is not as powerful as our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. I remember reading that when I was doing my study, and I was like, wow. It does not have the power because my God has it all. So we see here, if you want to have your life built upon the rock, if you want to have a life that is stable and well built, one that can weather the storm, you have to do these three things in your walk with Christ. You have to come to the Lord. And if you're a Christian, you've already come to the Lord. You have to hear the word He says. And that's daily, reading through His word. Prayer, devotion, with everything. Hear His word. But then you also have to act on His word. So many Christians today, they come and they fill pews and they sit and they listen. They walk out the doors unchanged, unaffected by the words that they heard. May that never be here at this church. May that never be. Because if you really are a follower, if your life is dedicated to this cause, if you're anchored in the foundation, it changes everything about you because that foundation becomes a part of you. The skyscraper is not different from the foundation it is built on. They are one and the same. And when we become a Christian, the Holy Spirit indwells us and He lives inside of us. And He gives us that counseling that we need as we're going through life to make the right choices, to act the way we're supposed to act. Are we going to fail? Are we going to mess up? Absolutely. We still got that old sin nature inside of us. But we try our best. And each day we strive to grow closer and closer and closer to our Lord Jesus. It's like James tells us, faith without works is dead. Not that we work for our faith, but that we work from our faith. Because of what Jesus has done for us, it spurs us into action to reach a dead and dying world around us. So the question everybody has to answer here today for themselves is, am I building my life on the right place? Are my priorities right in my life? Because sometimes, even as Christians, we can start building on the foundation, but then we can get sidetracked and decide we want to go build us a summer home on the beach over here somewhere or something and kind of leave this over here and kind of do our own thing. But it's up to you to examine your own life and answer yourself honestly about where you are at with the Lord right now. And kind of shifting into the second part of this. This is why this is so important to me. And I feel like this passage is so important for our youth ministry. And I really want this to be the motto of what we're trying to do here as our youth. First, we see come. We want to bring youth, young adults, children, families in. That's what we want to do. So this involves our outreach. It involves our community events. And it also involves our youth-specific trips and events and things like that. Most of these things that we're going to have to do if we want to build our program here, if we want to build up our younger people here in this church, it has to be a church-wide effort. It has to be. So as a church, we're going to have to get together and think, what are some outreaches that we could do? What are some events that we can host here as a church, at the church, for the community, that we can draw people in? And I've already been working with some of our youth, asking them what are some things that they think would work best for our youth. Because one of the things I like to do, it's a youth ministry, not a youth ministry. It's on the head, the students, they're the ones who are going to really be bringing each other in. They're the ones who are going to be inviting their friends. So I like to give them some ownership of it, most of the ownership of it when it comes to that. So that is what the come is part. We want to bring them in. And when we bring them in, we want to provide a place where they hear. And this is where we get to dig deep. And this is really what I'm wanting for our youth ministry, is us to be able to dig deep into discipleship. So when they come here, we want them to have a place where they can hear the gospel, where they can hear the truth. Not just another place where they can come and, hang out, play silly games or whatever. Although we play silly games sometimes, I'm not going to lie. So if you see us playing a silly game, just know there's some gospel truth behind it. But that is my ambition. I want us to have a place where they can come and they can hear the truth. Because so many places, they're being fed lies and indoctrinated by lies. Whether that be in their households, whether that be in their school system. There has to be a place where people can come hear the truth. And this is going to be the place for that. So you see here, I have on here, got it on here as well. Some of the things we really want to focus on as we're starting off, as we're trying to lay this foundation for these students, is obviously we're going to focus on the gospel, making sure the students really understand that and have a good grasp on the gospel, as well as some of the foundations of the faith. It's like me and Harrison were talking about this morning. I was like, what does it actually mean to be saved? I was like, we throw some churchy words around sometimes, and sometimes we don't really have a good definition of those things. So making sure we understand the things that are the foundations of our faith, like salvation, like baptism, like discipleship, all these other things. And then we're going to transition in Sunday mornings and going over the commands of Christ, because that directly impacts how they act. Because how can you do what somebody tells you if you don't know what they told you to do? Right? Right? Yeah, makes sense. Makes sense to me. And then lastly, also will provide a time always to answer any and every question they have. Because I remember when I was that age, I was full of questions. Some of them were not. They always say there's no stupid questions. I probably had a bunch of them. But my youth pastor, very patient, very persistent with me, constantly answering whatever questions I had and have still. I still talk to him today. He still answers my dumb questions sometimes. But that is what I strive to be here. Because you learn more when you're asking the questions you want to know about. So always provide a time for that. And lastly, give them a chance to act. All this, the coming to the church here, the hearing of the things they hear here, is all in preparation to live out the gospel in their daily lives and to be lights in their schools and in their households and in their communities. Because something today, a trend that you see, is that students nowadays, it used to be your parents brought you to church. If you came to church, your parents were normally Christians. Many of the students that you see today come from dark households, where the parents couldn't give 2 pennies about the name of Jesus. So for them to be emboldened to where they can live out the Gospels, like I said, in their schools and mostly in their own households. That's the main mission. Also, to give them an opportunity to act in community mission opportunities and then service within the church. Many things that need to be done around the church. Churches just don't run themselves, do they, gentlemen? No. Lots of going on. So we want to prepare them for service in the church. And then again, ownership of the youth program. This is what my vision is for our youth here at Temple Baptist Church. To be able to reach out, to have more students come in, but for our students that are here, to provide them a place to hear the truth and to answer any questions they have so that they can act out the gospel in their daily lives. So you may be asking, Cayman, how can I help? Glad you asked that question. I have a challenge for everybody here. If you do Wednesday night prayer meeting, you've already heard about this. But now I'm asking the whole church if you will please take part in this. Because we know when we pray, we have a direct hotline to the God of the universe who can answer any and every question that we have and meet every need that we have. And although you can't see it up there very well, I'm going to tell you what it is. I call this the 648 challenge is what I call it. So here's what I do. I have my phone, right? And every day at 6:48, my phone goes off. It goes ding-a-ling-a-ling-a-ling-a-ling. It goes something like that, right? And it has a little thing on there, and it says, pray for the youth. There's certain things that I pray for. First off, I pray for the students that we have by name. The ones that we have, the ones who are looking forward to have, the ones that we've already made connections with. I pray for them by name because that's something as a youth minister I'm compelled to do. But also what we want to pray for as a church, collectively, if we want to see our youth grow in the next year, is we want to pray for specifically outreach ideas for our church. Pray that God will give us discernment in making decisions such as those, and that God will fill our heads with ideas for things that will work best for our community. We also want to pray for, or you specifically want to pray for how God can use you in community outreach for our church. Because God has given each and every one of us special gifts and special talents that are not like the person next to us. So each of us can be used in a unique way to reach our community. And we also want to pray that God will be working in the hearts of our community as we're prepping for this growth. And pray that God will bring young people into the church as a result of this. So that's for the come part. For the hear part, we want to pray that for the students that we have, that God will open the minds of the youth to seek Him, and that He will create excitement surrounding His Word in their lives, and that He can fill their heads with questions so that they can further their relationship with Him. And then lastly, we want to pray as a church that the students that we have and the students that we will have in the future, that they can be lights in their household, in their schools, in their communities, and they can live bold, unashamed lives, and that God can support them along the way. One of the most important things that we will do here as a church in prepping for this growth in youth ministry is praying as a church. We will get nowhere in this endeavor if we do not commit ourselves to prayer. So that's why I'm asking if you would please. It can be 6:48 in the morning, 6:48 at night, whichever time you prefer. I'm a young guy. Typically, I'm not up at 6:48, so I do it at 6:48 at night. But if you'd rather do it at 6:48 in the morning, that's up to you. But if y'all could please join in this effort, I think the results are going to be fantastic because the harvest is ripe out there. We just need the gatherers now. So as we close today, I just want to call back to what we were talking about earlier. Maybe there's someone in here who was thinking about when we were talking about earlier, and they were thinking, man, maybe my life isn't where it needs to be right now. Maybe my life isn't real stable. Maybe my life is real shaky. There's no better time than now to get right with the Lord. So, Brother Sam, if you'll come up.
Thank you, Cayman. God has spoken.